Can you ceiling mount an ultra short throw projector? Of course. If it's got mounting holes, you can mount it. But major brands like Epson specifically say not to mount USTs like their flagship LS800 on the ceiling. So I guess the better question is, should you mount your ultra short throw projector on the ceiling? Today on The Hookup, we're going to take a look at the performance differences of ambient light rejecting and ceiling light rejecting screens when using a ceiling mounted UST versus the standard furniture mount solution. And I'll cover a lot of the other pros and cons that you might not have considered. Starting with the most important question, what happens to your ALR or CLR screen when the projector is mounted above the screen rather than below it? For these tests, I'll be using the top two performing screens from my UST Projector Showdown, the 100-inch fixed-frame lenticular CLR Spectra Vantage, and the 100-inch ALR for Movie Fresnel screen. A lenticular CLR screen has a microscopic sawtooth structure with a flat, light-absorbing layer on the top and a reflective angled layer underneath, resulting in the reflection of light that comes from below the screen and the rejection of light coming from above. In contrast, a Fresnel ALR screen uses a series of concentric circle-shaped ridges starting at the bottom middle of the screen to reflect light coming from a single position and reject light coming from any other angle. As you can imagine, you can't just mount your projector above an ALR or CLR screen and expect it to work, since the entire purpose of these screens is to block light from above. So to get them to work, you'll need to flip your screen upside down. And to see the consequences of doing that, I ran separate tests using 4 different lighting conditions, with both ceiling mounted positioning and standard positioning. And then in Adobe Premiere, I flipped and mirrored the ceiling mount video so we can get an exact performance comparison between the two. Starting with the Spectra Vantage lenticular CLR screen, the first condition uses 80 watts of diffused LED light bars mounted 45 degrees from the center of the screen, and it had an obvious outcome. By flipping the screen upside down, we're now casting ceiling light directly on the reflective portion of the screen, resulting in a completely washed out image compared to the standard screen orientation. Using 80 watts of diffused LED light bars mounted at a 15-degree angle, which is roughly equivalent to having lighting over your seating area, the standard screen orientation is also noticeably better with greater contrast and deeper blacks, but the ceiling mounting solution isn't unusable here, just not ideal. Next, I placed a smaller 20-watt light source parallel to the screen to mimic ambient light coming through a window with the blinds closed but not completely blacked out. And the results were interesting. On the left, you can see that the mirrored ceiling-mounted orientation appears to have better black levels and higher contrast. And while both screens have a slight gradient of black levels, the darkest area of the standard orientation screen is about equal to the brightest area of the ceiling-mounted option. And then last, in zero ambient light conditions, the standard screen orientation has a noticeably higher gain than the upside-down screen, resulting in greater perceived contrast. And in zero ambient light conditions, the black levels were very good in both orientations, with no significant difference between them. Which means for the lenticular CLR screen, the vast majority of lighting conditions significantly favored the standard screen orientation and the standard projector positioning directly under the screen. However, I'd argue that the condition mimicking ambient light sneaking through a window is probably the most realistic for most home projector setups. Next, let's take a look at the For Movie Fresnel ALR screen with the same 4 conditions. Predictably, just like the lenticular screen, light from a 45-degree angle was an absolute nightmare for the ceiling-mounted projector and upside-down screen. And if you plan on having lights directly above your screen, then ceiling mounting is basically not an option. At 15 degrees, the results were pretty interesting because the standard orientation screen on the right had much better black levels and seemed to reject more ambient light, but the ceiling-mounted orientation had a higher gain, resulting in slightly brighter whites and more vibrant colors. But I don't think there's any question that the standard orientation screen performed better in these conditions. In the 20-watt parallel light test, both screen orientations did a near perfect job rejecting ambient light and had fantastic black levels, but the ceiling-mounted projector's higher gain led to a noticeable increase in contrast. However, on closer inspection, you can see that the gain seems to be inconsistent and applies more to the top of the screen than the bottom. And although the standard orientation screen also had a brightness gradient, this time from bottom to top, the differences between the two were much more pronounced on the ceiling-mounted projector. And in zero ambient light conditions, the same trend was even more apparent, with the bright areas in the top of the screen becoming even more exaggerated. Interestingly, when I was watching these tests in person, the top hotspot didn't stick out to me at all, and it wasn't until I compared the footage side by side that I saw the unusual brightness. So I'd guess that most people would never notice it. I also reran all the tests using a contrast-based ALR screen from Silver Ticket, and I noticed that same uneven brightness on whatever side of the screen was closest to the projector. And it's worth noting that regardless of the projector mounting location, the contrast-based ALR screen looks significantly worse than both the lenticular CLR and Fresnel ALR screens. So if you're using an ultra short throw projector, I would always recommend getting a screen made specifically for USTs rather than a screen that advertises compatibility with all projectors. So between the lenticular and Fresnel screens, both perform slightly worse worse when ceiling mounted in a 15-degree ambient light and 0 ambient light conditions, and actually increased in performance with the side lighting condition. Comparing the two side by side, the 4-movie Fresnel was in a completely different league from the lenticular screen as far as black levels and contrast and overall brightness, as long as your space doesn't require wide viewing angles. Up until now, all the tests that you've seen have been using the Nexigo PJ90 Aurora Ultra Short Throw Projector, which I think is an ideal candidate for ceiling mounting because it is significantly smaller and lighter than other projectors in its price point and brightness. But I wanted to see if the hot spotting that I noticed on the 4-movie screen would be the same or worse with a much brighter projector like the AWOL LTV 3500. And my testing did confirm that the center top hotspot gets worse as the brightness of the projector increases. Still, it's pretty hard to argue with the performance of these screens, which still look pretty great with both 80 watts of light on at a 15-degree angle and an additional 20 watts of light directly under the screen. We're not talking about OLED blacks here, but the colors are still vibrant and the image quality is still amazing. So now that we've seen that you can in fact ceiling mount a UST without much compromise in performance, assuming you don't have lights directly above your screen, let's talk about the other pros and cons of ceiling mounted versus a more traditional UST mounting solution. Starting with the good stuff. Ultra short throw projectors are notoriously difficult to get aligned perfectly with your screen. Because of the steep projection angle, any slight changes in the pitch, tilt, or roll of your projector will cause large changes in the projected image and can lead to distorted areas and rounded corners, and although it might be tempting to just get the alignment good enough and then use digital keystoning to fit your screen, any use of digital keystone will result in a decreased focus uniformity. But depending on the type of ceiling mount that you use, the screen alignment process can be much easier than it is with furniture placement, because high-quality UST-specific mounts come with fine adjustment knobs for the horizontal rotation and roll, which are exponentially more precise and easy to use than leveling your image using your projector's adjustable feet. The other thing to consider is that ultra short throw projectors have very short throw distances, but not zero throw distance. The AWOL LTV 3500, for example, needs 9 3/4 inches from the screen to the front of the projector, and a total of 24.5 inches from the screen to the back of the projector. If you're using a custom-built entertainment center, that's not a big deal, but if you're trying to work with your existing furniture, typical TV consoles are only about 16 to 18 inches deep, meaning your console will need to be pulled 6 to 8 inches off the wall to get proper positioning. Add to that the fact that the screen for a UST like the AWOL needs to be 15.5 inches above your console table, and you're likely going to be mounting your screen too high for your viewing area. A good ceiling mount removes a lot of those concerns by giving you adjustable distance from your wall and allows the extra room height to be above the projector screen rather than below it. Keep in mind though that you'll need decently high ceilings to pull this off, since you'll need a minimum of 7.5 inches above the projector, then 15.5 inches from the bottom of the projector to the top of the screen, and then a 100-inch screen is approximately 50 inches tall including bezels, so if you're planning on using a 21-inch tall TV console, you'd need at least 8-foot ceilings to be able to pull off a ceiling mount. Another significant advantage of ceiling mounting is the ability to know that your projector will always be aligned perfectly every time you turn it on. If you have kids or pets, even a slight bump to your projector can cause misalignment, which can be super annoying if you just want to turn on a movie and relax, but you end up needing to adjust your projector's aim. And the last big advantage to ceiling mounting is that it neutralizes a common argument against USTs for dedicated home theaters, which is that the projector takes up the space that would normally be devoted to your center channel speaker for a full surround sound system, forcing you to mount your center channel either behind the screen or significantly too low in relation to your viewing area. Now, for what it's worth, I solved all these issues without ceiling mounting by using a motorized projector tray, which works perfectly for my space, but your mileage may vary. So now let's talk about the bad stuff. First, as we talked about, your ALR or CLR screen is going to be more effective in more lighting conditions when it's mounted the right way up. The specific geometries of the screen ridges are engineered with a standard seating position in mind, and flipping them upside down causes uneven changes in gain on different parts of the screen that you may or may not notice. Second, a major advantage of ultra short throw projectors over a traditional projector or even a wall-mounted TV is that you don't need to run wires up through your wall. For this case, ceiling mounting comes with a very similar difficulty to a wall-mounted TV in that you only need to run the wires up the wall rather than up the wall and through the ceiling like you would for a traditional projector. But that still represents a lot more work than just letting the wires hang over the back of your TV console like you would with a standard UST setup. So in summary, can you ceiling mount an ultra short throw projector? Yes. Should you ceiling mount your ultra short throw projector? Maybe. If your lighting conditions, ceiling height, existing furniture, and viewing area are right, you could end up with a better experience by ceiling mounting your projector rather than a more standard projector placement. But it's important to understand all the limitations of ceiling mounting before jumping into the project, which is probably why it's easier for Epson to just say don't do it rather than deal with unhappy customers who didn't understand what they were getting into. I've got links down in the description for all the specific projectors, mounts, and screens that I used in this video, and as always, there are no sponsored reviews on this channel, but if you use those links, I do earn a small commission on the sale at no cost to you. Thank you so much to all of my awesome patrons over at Patreon for your continued support of my channel, and if you're interested in supporting the channel, please check out the links down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching The Hookup.